From Japanese denim and Indian jasmine oil, to Italian Calacatta marble and East African shea butter, we travelled the world to uncover the stories behind some of the world's most valuable items. Our first stop is Fez, Morocco, where local artisans produce some of the world's most sought-after ceramic tiles. The elaborate mosaics made of these Zalige tiles have long been an iconic feature of Moroccan architecture, but in recent years, their craftsmanship has caused designers around the world to take notice.
Zalige tiles start out as a simple mixture of clay and water. But after several days of painstaking work, artisans chisel and transform them into a complex work of art. Compared to other popular tiles, Zalige tiles aren't cheap. A square foot can cost $50, while ceramic subway tiles might only cost around 15 cents. But this art form relies on the skilled artisans that make each tile by hand. Like Ahmed Al-Magari, who has been making Zalige tiles for 54 years. So how are Zalige tiles made? And is this what makes them so expensive? While perfection is often valued, it's the imperfect qualities of Zalige that make the tiles so unique. Artisans in Morocco have been hand-making Zalige tiles for centuries. Today, they continue this tradition in the city of Fez.
يعني خدمه ما كتشبه الخدمه وهندسه ما كتشبه الهندسه حتى كيولي الانسان عنده مقتدر كيولي عنده واحد التجربه في الصنعه لان الصنعه ما يمكنلكش تقول انا راني معلم ما عمرك ما تقول انا معلم لان ديما كتتعلم ديما الجديد.
But before artisans at Arabesque can create tiles, they first need to form the clay. Fez has remained a center for Zalige partly because of these rocks. They're considered some of the best materials in the region for making high-quality clay.
الطين هذا ديال المغرب هذا الاصل ديالو مغربي وكاين غير في مدينه فاس.
This clay is believed to be more durable than some clays found further south, and it can withstand very high temperatures once fired. First, an artisan tosses the rocks into a pit in the ground called a zuba. They fill the zuba with water and leave the rocks to soften for a day. Then, in one of many tedious stages to come, an artisan kneads the clay using their hands and feet to make it more malleable. After the clay has fermented for a day, a different artisan has the task of molding it into the proper shape. The artisan places the clay into a mold, smoothing it over with one hand so the surface is flat. For every 10 kilograms of clay, artisans can make over 10 square feet, or about 1 meter of tiles. After molding hundreds of tiles, they leave the clay to dry under the sun. The next stage is vital to ensuring the tiles will remain intact.
نحطوا القلة فوق منها القياس كنجيب واحد الكوتشيه جنويه كيضربها باش كتقاد كتعطينا سنتيم ونص سنتيم وشويه على حساب القياس اللي بغينا حنا.
Hitting the clay repeatedly also removes air bubbles. If the air isn't removed, the tile may break when an artisan later tries to chisel it. Once each piece is perfectly square, the tiles dry again under the sun. Finally, it's time for the clay to head to the kiln. Precision is critical at this stage, which is why just one person is trusted to lead the job.
وكنهزوه كنجيبوه المرحله هي هذه كيبس ملي كنجيبوه كيبس المرحله كندخلوه للفرينه احنا كندخلوه للفرينه هي هذه كيدخل للفرينه كيكون الشحان عندنا شحان اختصاصي بهذا الشيء لما كانش هو ما يتشحنش هذه الفرينه الاختصاص تعلم هذه الحرفه هذه تعلمها من الطفوله ديالو.
Abdelwahed glazes the tiles and then they're fired for a second time. This second firing ensures the color won't fade. It also gives Zalige tiles one of their most distinct features. Heat doesn't circulate evenly in a traditional Moroccan kiln, which is why each tile, even those with the same color glaze, will have a slightly different shade. But these tiles are just getting started. After glazing, the tiles move on to the cutting stage, where artisans trace the small shapes they'll later carve. Chiseling the tiles requires total concentration. Artisans must carve each piece as cleanly as possible. Otherwise, it may not fit properly into the final design. How well and efficiently this is done depends on the expertise of the artisan and a tool known as the menkash. It's a combination of a hammer and an axe. Because they're hand-chiseled, no two Zalige tiles will look exactly the same. It's the prime feature that distinguishes Zalige from mass-produced tiles that are notably uniform in color, shape, and texture. Arabesque first creates designs on the computer. Then Ahmed uses a paper printout as a guide to assemble the final design on the floor. Ahmed inserts each individual tile by hand, like a puzzle piece, making sure every tile seamlessly fits next to its neighbor.
يعني كتشوف العين ديالك باليد ديالك الحواس ديالك كلها عقلك الحواس ديالك كلها كتخدم مع داك الحاجه اللي كتكون كتخدم فيها بعد سميتو 1000 قطعه عاد يمكن لها تعمر لك متر وبعض الخطره يمكن غير مثلا 100 قطعه غتعمر لك متر.
After about 15 days of assembling the pieces, Ahmed can reveal the finished design.
ها هو نفس طبق الاصل. هاي ها الرسمه اللي عطاونا من الاداره ها هو طبق الاصل. يعني كاينين جوج ها الرسمه اللي عطاونا من الاداره احنا خدمنا عليها. فهمتيني؟ كي كتشوف هذا الرسمه هنا اللي كاينه في البلان وما هنا كاينه.
The final price of a mosaic like this is the sum of several factors, including the number of pieces and their shape.
This is the average, normal 36 pieces. The shape of it is very square, so the price of it is very affordable. Unlike if we go here, which is made of stars and cross. There are 36 pieces by 36, so 36 pieces here also, but the price of this is 4 times the price of the other one because of the shape.
Adil also considers the size of the tiles within a design. Smaller pieces are not as simple to chisel by hand. The smaller the tiles, the more expensive the design will be.
There are areas where you have a square foot that can have 64 pieces, 128 pieces, 360 pieces versus 36 pieces. So if you have one that costs $10 per square foot, the other one might cost 10 times $100 per square foot.
The price increases further for more complex designs.
This tile has an interlace. The interlace is automatically double the price. So if you have a $10 square foot, with the interlace it's $20.
Centuries ago, Zalige tiles were reserved for royal palaces. Today, they've become synonymous with Moroccan design. You'll find them covering walls, floors, and fountains across Fez.
When we talk about Morocco and Moroccan architecture, the first thing comes to mind is Zalige.
But its influence goes beyond Morocco. Demand has grown in the US, especially in recent years, as notable designers like Kelly Worsler incorporate Zalige into their own work. But the way some are using the tiles is different. Rather than mosaics, they're creating monochromatic backsplashes. Part of the appeal of using just one color of Zalige is that it appears ombre when multiple tiles come together, thanks to their subtle variation in shade. But while Zalige becomes more popular overseas, Adil struggles to find young people locally he can trust with the trade.
This is more of a living art, but it's also a dying tradition. Nowadays, people are not patient as much as in before. If you look at the people who used to work in this trade, they are very calm, they are very peaceful, they have inner peace. Nowadays, we find extreme hardship to train and adopt people who can carry this kind of tradition as Zalij artisans.
الانسان اي عمل مني هذا كيخصو يعطيه الحق ديالو. اي عمل يمشي الانسان يقوم به تيخصو يعني يعطيه الحق ديالو. الصنعه الانسان الا بغى مثلا يملكها ولا شي حاجه راه تيخصو يعطيها حقها ويعطيها الوقت ديالها باش كيكسب واحد المهارات. ومع الطولان ديال الحياه ديالو هو محدو هو تيخدم هو تيتعلم. راه ماشي المعلم تيتسمى راه معلم، ديما تيبقى تيتعلم، الحياه ديالو كلها ديما تيبقى يتعلم.
This is a handmade iron kettle. For centuries, artisans have made kettles by pouring molten iron through a small opening in molds like this. Once the iron hardens, they continue the tedious work of hammering the kettle free. It's only used to boil water, but that doesn't make it cheap. You can buy a mass-produced kettle for $20, but a handmade iron kettle can cost over $300. So who makes these kettles? And why are they so expensive? This is Iwate Prefecture in Japan. Iron kettles have been made here for hundreds of years. Each one starts with a sketch. Nobu Miya runs Kamasada, a workshop founded by his grandfather.
大体20歳ぐらいから始めてますんで、50年、まだ50年です。
Designing a new kettle takes him 2 to 3 years.
売れるものを作るっていうのは意外と早くできる仕事なんだろうと思いますけども、確かにビジネスですから売れるものを作るっていうのは絶対必要なことなんだけれども、じゃあ自分の木にそぐわないでも見にあんまり綺麗でなくても売れるものを作るかっていうと、それはうちはしないし。
At this workshop, every single kettle is made by hand. But before you start melting iron, you need a mold. The mold is made from 3 parts that form a gap where the iron is poured in.
そうすると、言った通りに外側と内側が間がこの 2.5 ミリから2ミリの隙間になるんですけども、その隙間を、この尻型の穴から流し込んだ液体の鉄が通って、鉄瓶になるという感じですね。
The core is destroyed with each use, but the outer molds are reused 2 to 3 times, depending on the design of the kettle.
それ以上になると明らかに質が目立って悪くなりますので、だから一型から一つしか取れないっていった場合ですと、単純に普通の品物の3倍はするわけですね。
According to Nobu, around 70% of the work is making the mold. This process also creates the most recognizable aspect of the design, this bumpy pattern called arare. This mold has around 2,000 dots, all placed by hand.
僕の場合はだいたい2時間半から3時間で全部押し切ってしまう感じですね。あられの数が多くなればなるほど基本的には、鉄瓶の値段にはかかってきますね。はい、高くなってきますね。
Artisans coat the core with charcoal dust to make it easier to separate from the iron. Then Shitaro delicately places it inside the outer mold. But he won't know if something went wrong until the iron has cooled. There's a lot of anticipation waiting for the iron to melt. Shitaro has to mentally prepare for the pour, a dangerous and physically demanding task. A mistake here could ruin the kettle, so experience and confidence are essential. Once the iron cools, Shotaro finally sees the result of his hard work.
ここが一番ほっとするか、ああ失敗したってなるかっていうのが分かる瞬間でもありますね。できるだけ、無理のない取り出し方をするという感じですね。これが、まあ、多少欠けている部分がありますけど、まあ、ほぼ元になったということで、もう一回使いますね。まあまあですね。この中子の取り出しやすさっていうと80点ぐらいですかね。はい、安心ですね、ここでやっと。
Traditional iron kettles like this one don't have any enamel coating inside. Instead, artisans heat the kettle to 900 degrees Celsius on a bed of charcoal. This creates an oxidized layer, which helps prevent rust. Without an enamel coating, the iron subtly changes the taste of boiled water. But this kettle isn't done yet. The final stage is one of the most skill-intensive steps. Nobu heats up the kettle and brushes on lacquer, coating and coloring the outside.
仕上げ着色っていうのは意外とかなりベテランにならないと綺麗な仕上げができないっていうのは温度管理なんですよね、これ難しいのが。そういう意味では、まあ、一番最終工程にふさわしく、あとは自分が思い描いてたものがこの着色一つで全然違うものになったりすることもあるんで、まあ、分業の方が効率的であることは分かってるんですけども、どうしても責任の所在が曖昧になったり、作る側が面白くなく作るんですね。で、ものっていうのは面白く作らないといいものはできないっていうのは僕の考え方なんで。
Most kettles from Kamasada cost $300 to $400, but prices can be as high as $2,000. Despite the high price, customers appreciate the slow-paced nature of these kettles. The design is considered wabi-sabi, which is difficult to translate literally, but refers to the concept of appreciating imperfection and practicing mindfulness.
で、僕はデザインするときに、決して便利なものっていうのがいいものではないと。っていうのは使って幸せになるものがいいものだと。お金を出してその僕の作った品物を評価して買ってくれるっていうのは、これはとても大事なことだと思います。それから一生使って次の代にも受け渡して自分らの美意識っていうのかな、心とか文化を伝えたいと。
Iron kettles were common in Japan in the 17th and 18th centuries when they were used in tea ceremonies. But they struggled to compete with convenient, mass-produced options after World War II. In recent years, interest in their aesthetic qualities has reignited demand. But that demand has brought on many knockoffs that can be bought for a fraction of the price. These kettles imitate the arare pattern but usually aren't made in Japan. They also have an enameled interior instead of the bare iron used in the traditional version. But the original, uncoated interior is actually one of the main selling points. Customers say they like the taste of water boiled in these kettles, and some also value the small amount of iron content it adds to their water.
鉄瓶で沸かしたお湯がまろやかになること、はい、鉄イオンが溶け込むことで塩素を分解するので軽き臭さが抜けて味が美味しくなる、まろやかになる。1世代前2世代前おじいちゃんおばあちゃんの家にあったっていう方の方が多いのが現状です。で今こうやってカフェで見に来ていただいた方は 見たことはあるけど使ったことがなかったっていう人の方が多いです。
Despite an increase in popularity, Nobuo says that demand for this type of kettle isn't enough to sustain the business on its own.
私は昔からここは鉄瓶とか茶の湯釜を使って家業なんですけども、やっぱりそのライフスタイルに合った形でデザインして、提案しているっていうのが、もちろん古い伝統的なテクニックを使った鉄瓶であるとか、それから茶の湯釜であるとか、そういうものは作り続けて、その技術を伝承しようと思ってそういう仕事もやっております。
Shotaro, Nobuo's son, has trained in making iron kettles and plans on taking over the business to continue this centuries-old craft.
この工場の土間に敷いてある砂っていうのは、鋳型を作る材料そのものの砂がもう敷かれてます。で、鋳型ができて金属を流し込んだ後、型を壊すときにこの土間にまた戻してしまいます。ここの土間は、うちの祖父が創業した100何年前からの砂も混じってるかもしれません。
Right now, these jasmine buds don't smell like anything. But once they bloom, producers in India process their coveted aroma into one of the priciest oils in the world. Just 1 kilogram of jasmine oil can cost over $5,000. It's a key ingredient in luxury perfumes. But to get 1 kilogram of some jasmine oil, these women need to pluck over 5,000 buds. So what does jasmine smell like? And why is the oil so expensive? For hundreds of years, jasmine has been used in India to make garlands and headpieces for special occasions. Its scent is sweet, fruity, and floral, blending well with other fragrances. And while India grows over 80 varieties of jasmine, Jasmine grandiflorum and sambac are 2 of the most commercially valuable.
It's been considered very divine. And sambac, especially even amongst other flowers, is considered 1 notch superior. It's the most preferred flower.
Jasmine sambac has this ease, this friendliness, this happiness. It is a joyful scent.
Jasmine sambac thrives in Madurai, the jasmine capital of India. Like any flower, jasmine produces a strong scent only after it blooms. But local sellers don't want jasmine flowers, they want the buds. That's because once the flower blooms, the scent only lasts a few days. The buds last longer, so they're easier to transport, whether it be for garlands or oil extraction. Raja runs a jasmine oil company. But before Raja can produce the oil, he'll need to wait for the day's harvest. Jasmine is a night-blooming flower. To maximize the harvest and ensure the buds make it to the markets in time, harvesters head to the fields early. Rati is one of a handful of women tasked with plucking the buds. It's not as simple as grabbing each bud she sees.
Only the right bud blooms that day. Otherwise, it's not going to bloom. So if it doesn't bloom, no fragrance.
Deciphering which buds to harvest requires a keen eye, one that Rati has trained over the last 10 years in these fields.
இந்த பூவு இன்னைக்கு பறிக்கிற பூவு. இந்த பூவு இன்னைக்கு எடுக்க மாட்டோம். அது 2 நாள் கழிச்சு எடுப்போம். இது 2 நாள் கழிச்சு இதை எடுப்போம். இது பூத்த பூவு, நேத்து பூத்த பூவு. இதை எடுக்க மாட்டோம். இந்த பூவை நாங்கள் பூத்த பூவை எடுக்கவே மாட்டோம்.
Rati goes to each bush one by one, plucking thousands of buds before she collects a kilogram of jasmine. Gathering that much takes her about an hour. The work must be done gently by hand, so as not to damage the buds. Damaged or wilted buds mean more work for Rati.
Jasmine is a very laborious picking process. As a kilo of jasmine, just to give you a perspective, will have about 5,000 to 6,000 independent flowers. So to pick 1 kilo, they have to move 5,000 times. The hand moves back and forth 5,000 times to pick just 1 kilo of flowers.
But that's still a tiny fraction of the buds needed to produce a kilogram of oil. For 1 kilogram of jasmine oil, Raja needs 1 metric ton, or 1,000 kilograms of flowers. As she works, Rati collects the buds in her sari to protect them and preserve their fragrance.
சவுக்கரை பேத்தில் கொட்டினா பூ வெந்துடும். மார்க்கெட்டு போகக்குள்ளேயும் பூ வெந்துடும். எடுக்க மாட்டாங்க மார்க்கெட்டில். கட்ட முடியாது, வண்ண முடியாது. பூ வெயிலுக்கு வெந்துடும். சாக்கையில் போட்டு அனுப்புனா அது பூ வெந்துடும். அது வச்சு நாங்கள் சேரில் கட்டி.
She'll harvest for about 5 hours straight. It's tedious and tiring, but it's critical for her to keep moving before it gets too hot. Then the buds head to the local market.
இங்கே வந்து நிலக்கோட்டையில் மல்லி தரம்பாக்கு வந்திருக்கோம். குவாலிட்டி பார்த்து எடுத்து கம்பெனிக்கு அனுப்பிச்சிட்டு போயிட்டே இருக்கோம்.
Murugan is used to the market's chaotic energy. He's been sourcing jasmine for oil production for 18 years. Practically all corners of the market are full of buyers, bags of jasmine buds, and scales to determine the proper quantity for sale. The rate today is 500 rupees per kilogram. Before buying, he assesses the buds closely to determine if the size will be worth the price.
இது சைஸ் ஸ்மால் சைஸு பொடிசு. இதில் ஓப்பன் ஆனால் வாசனை இருக்காது, ஸ்மால் கம்மியாக இருக்கும். இது ஃபேக்ட்ரிக்கு சென்ட்டுக்கு போட மாட்டோம். இது நல்லா இருக்கும், பெஸ்ட் குவாலிட்டி. இதை போடுவோம். இது நல்லா ஸ்மெல் இருக்கும், நல்லா ஓப்பன் ஆகும், நல்லாவும் இருக்கும்.
When the sun has set, Raja's employees begin unloading bags full of jasmine buds back at the factory. The first step is to spread them out with rakes, and then again with their hands and feet. Spreading out the buds is crucial to preserving them. Leaving them in a big pile would generate heat, which would again cause them to wilt. Then Raja's team waits until the flowers begin to bloom.
The minute it starts blooming, it starts emitting the fragrance. And then after some time, you can see emits a bad fragrance. So, there's a constant chemical reaction that's happening in the flower. For us, it's so important to capture the fragrance at the right moment, which is soon after it blooms, which is the best in terms of yield and the smell.
Like several other white flowers, jasmine is rich in indole. Ironically, indole is found in feces too. In the case of feces, there's too much indole, so it produces an unpleasant smell. But in limited amounts, it creates an appealing aroma, as it does with jasmine. When the jasmine has bloomed, Raja's team loads the flowers into 4 5,000-liter extractors. The flowers then soak in a solvent. Once the solvent absorbs the smell of the flowers, they remove all of the liquid. They're left with this waxy, hard substance called concrete. It's what Raja uses to finally extract the oil.
You add alcohol into the concretes, and then the concrete is separated off the waxes, it's filtered, and then we get the absolute.
Jasmine Sambak is the most coveted of all jasmine flowers, hence the high price. At its peak, jasmine Sambak flowers can cost 10 times more than other types of jasmine. And when it comes to the final price of the oil, the majority of it depends on the cost of the flower itself.
About 60%, the bulk of the cost, is attributed towards the flower cost itself. So it varies depending on the price of the flowers every year. The cost of 1 kilo of concrete is around $2,750 to $3,000. And the absolute is almost the double, like 5,500 plus per kilo of absolute.
But jasmine Sambak oil wasn't always this valuable. In fact, Raja says it was rarely harvested before the launch of Dior's J'adore fragrance.
That was when the Sambak became the in thing. Before that, Sambak was grown in India, but it was not really extracted.
Today, jasmine oil extracts travel from India all the way to Paris, where they will be used in many high-end fragrances, particularly at Guerlain. Guerlain sources jasmine Sambak oil directly from Raja.
The signature of the house is made with jasmine and 5 other ingredients. So jasmine is almost everywhere.
The company produces all of its fragrance blends in-house, including Mont Guerlain.
Jasmine Sambac is the star of Mont Guerlain. You have the top note of lavender, blend then in the jasmine sambac florals you enjoy. Then comes the sandalwood and the vanilla. This is such a soft and beautiful fragrance.
It takes between 1 to 2 months for Hiso Manabe to dye these threads a deep indigo blue. Denim made from these threads will maintain this rich color, and so will Manabe's nails for 3 weeks. That's because Manabe uses real indigo instead of the synthetic dyes most jeans are made with today. A pair of Momotaro jeans dyed with natural indigo can cost over $2,000. But using real indigo is just one element that can raise the price of Japanese denim. Each stage of production requires meticulous attention. So what exactly makes Japanese denim different? And is that enough to make it so expensive? In basic terms, Japanese denim refers to denim made in Japan, but today it often implies selvage denim. The name comes from the way fabric is woven on these old shuttle looms. They weave fabric with a sealed or self-finished edge, hence the name Selv Edge. It means the end of the fabric won't fray or unravel. You'll notice a pair of selvage jeans by the cuff. There's typically a colored line along the outseam. This type of denim is made here in Kojima, Japan.
本当に10代からジーンズはこの町のジーンズを履いてたと。
Momotaro is one of Kojima's most well-known denim brands. But before Momotaro makes denim, it must first dye the threads. The company's most expensive jeans are hand-dyed with natural indigo. Natural indigo comes from the leaves of the indigofera plant. Dyeing fabric with natural indigo has been a valued art form in Japan for centuries.
単純作業の繰り返しよね。根気がいるのと原料が高い。これはやはりもっと工夫していかなきゃやっぱり量産できないと思う。
Manabe dyes 60 rolls of cotton over several days. He wrings each roll out and hangs it up to dry before dyeing another.
5回でこのぐらい。これは乾くと半分ぐらいの色になっちゃう。
Manabe must dye each roll a total of about 30 times. Otherwise, the color won't be a dark enough blue. Dyeing jeans this way doesn't only take longer, it also costs more. A kilogram of some synthetic indigo can cost between $4 and $5. Depending on the quality, natural indigo might cost 10 times that.
非常に高い。大体我々がその調達するのは1票15万ぐらいするんだね。
That one bale is only enough to dye about 15 pairs of jeans. Although using natural dye raises the cost of production, it has unique effects on jeans that can't be produced by synthetic dyes.
植物には青の染料だけでなくて余分な染料もあるんで、少し黄みがかった染料が含まれている。そういったものがやはり微妙に青の色を変化させる。そこにはインディゴでは出せない色がある。
Today, cheaper synthetic dyes have mostly replaced natural ones, so jeans still made with natural dyes are often considered a premium product. Which is partly why Momotaro's Kinton or gold-labeled jeans are worth over $2,000. The increased price of this pair is a nod to the extra effort, skill, and money needed to dye the threads by hand and get the color just right. Not all Japanese denim or Momotaro jeans are made with natural indigo. But even so, the price remains high, around $200 to $300 for a pair like this. And that goes back to the way Japanese denim is woven. Before Toyota made cars, it made looms like this. Originally introduced in the 1920s, these Toyota looms are no longer made today. And although they look and sound like they're working fast, weaving fabric this way takes 5 times longer than weaving on modern projectile looms.
もともと世界で、アメリカで、作られたジーンズもその当時はその機械しかなかった。もう今1世紀経ってもヴィンテージのそのジーンズがやはり、1900年あるいは1920年、ね、あたりのジーンズがいい。でやはり何百万も出して古着を買い集めるわけです。
Despite the looms being automated, an experienced Momotaro technician has to keep a close eye on them as they run. He checks to see each loom is working smoothly and that all the threads are aligned correctly. Even so, it's possible something will go wrong.
直しながら使ってますね。部品は新しく作られていませんので、その部品一つ一つを、古い機械から、外して、使ったり。
On top of weaving slowly, the looms produce fabric less than a yard wide. That's about half the width of non-selvage denim, so producers need more fabric to make a pair of selvage jeans. This is yet another factor that increases the cost of production and ultimately the final price of the jeans. Shuttle looms are also less precise than projectile looms, but variations in the fabric make each yard unique. And ironically, that's what gives these jeans one of their biggest appeals. While most other jeans have a smooth surface, Japanese denim is a little bit rougher.
この凹凸がやはりデニムで一番大切な経年変化の縦落ち、当たり、そういったものに現れている。
While most Momotaro jeans are made on the automated looms, the most expensive gold label jeans are produced with an even slower, more traditional method. By hand with an antique loom. It takes 1 hour for Kazuki Ikeda to weave just 10 centimeters of fabric. While this process raises the price, the extra effort gives the jeans a distinctly different feel.
一番の違いというのはやはりこの肌触り。通常の汎用のものでしたら、ちょっとこう硬さであったりゴワゴワした感じがするんですけれども、手織りの場合は最初から、柔らかい、質感で履いていただくことができます。
And for denim enthusiasts, traveling from Thailand to Tokyo is worth the trip to buy Momotaro's most expensive pair.
Usually when you brought a new pair of jeans, you feel it's a little bit hard. And you feel like it's a little bit hard to move at first, right? But this one, even from the start, it feels so comfortable, like you have worn it for some times.
After the fabric is woven by hand or shuttle loom, it heads to the sewing room. According to Heddles, on average, most other types of denim weigh between 11 and 14 ounces, while most denim from Japan weighs 20 ounces. A heavier fabric makes Naomi Takebayashi's job more challenging.
で一番太いのはタコ糸状態の0番はもう本当に太くてとても縫いづらいです。年数で言えば本当に何年縫っても私らも何年縫っても難しいところもありますしね。難しいというか縫うのはもう全然だけどあれでよかったかなとかいうことはありますね。
Another cornerstone of Japanese denim is the artisanal nature of the way the jeans are finally formed. At Momotaro, all the stitching is done by hand. The same goes for adding each copper rivet. The final look and feel of a finished pair largely depend on Takebayashi's dedication to detail. Because shuttle looms are less precise, the fabric will naturally have several imperfections. But if Momotaro's retail stores find anything wrong with a pair of jeans, they mark it with a small sticker and send it here to the quality control room. Takebayashi sifts through the flagged jeans using a tweezer to repair each marked spot. Momotaro is one of around 40 denim makers in Kojima, considered the birthplace of denim in Japan. While Japanese denim from this city has found a luxury category to call its own, the denim industry hasn't been prominent in Kojima for very long.
世の中、日本中がですね、やっぱり、アメリカに憧れて、東京オリンピック1964年ですかね、それを契機にですね、ガラッとやはり、自由とアメリカというのにすごい憧れが強くなり、音楽も映画もそうですけども、ファッションも、その中でも学生運動でいろんなものが、もう自由奔放にいろんな形が、行われてきた。でその中でやはり1965年、が初めてこの小島というところでジーンズの生産が始まったと。
In the decades since, Japanese denim has reached far outside Japan. Today, it's considered one of the finest types of denim in the world. One way to make shea butter involves pounding and grinding dry shea nuts by hand. Another way requires two people to push a lever, as a cold press machine turns shea nut oil into a creamy, pale yellow butter. Regardless of the way it's done, producing shea butter is tedious work, and depending on how it's made, it can cost over $50 a kilo. But this isn't just any shea butter. This is East African shea butter, the most expensive version of the commonly known product. So what makes East African shea butter different? And why is it so expensive? When someone hears shea butter, it's likely they think of the West African variety. But in East Africa, a different kind of shea nut grows, a subspecies called Nilotica. The West African paradoxa tree is farmed, so it grows more abundantly. But Nilotica isn't typically planted. It grows in the wild in East African countries like Uganda and Sudan. East African shea butter can cost more than double the West African alternative. That's because it's easier to spread and absorbs quickly into the skin.
This is our Nilotica. Very low melting point. Like you see, when I spread, it easily melts. And within a few minutes, it will have sunk into my skin pores. But when we come to our West African shea butter, when you spread, this is how it turns out. It will remain on top because of the waxy texture.
That makes Nilotica more desirable for cosmetics companies, which use it for butters, oils, and soaps. And according to Lucy, this is one of the reasons demand for East African shea butter has grown both locally and abroad. In Uganda, Nilotica producers are trying to meet the growing demand. Akello and her peers have been harvesting shea fruits since 5 a.m. They're part of the Corner Adware Moya Women's Group, a self-help group for women in Uganda. In Uganda, shea producers are primarily organized women's groups like this. They start their day early so they can pick the best fruits before other groups come. Akello and the other harvesters pick the fruits off the ground once they've already fallen. Then they remove and eat the fruit to reveal the shea nut. They eat it because they won't need it to make the butter, and it's delicious. Quality control starts here, with only the best shea nuts moving on to processing. These are grade A nuts, which are whole, undamaged, and untouched by insects. The nuts are then dried in the sun for a few days to reduce moisture. Next, they're carefully cracked, and the kernels are dried again for 2 weeks. Now Akello can make the shea butter. It's usually done one of two ways, by hand or by machine. both requiring heavy manual labor. Making shea butter by hand is an intensive process. After the nuts dry the second time, producers heat ash over a fire for 30 minutes. Then they roast the shea nuts in the ashes for another 45 minutes, stirring constantly. This helps prevent mold and deactivates free fatty acids, or FFAs, which are harmful to the body. But they have to be careful. Too much heat could lead to a dark oil with high, rather than deactivated, FFA levels. Then the women spread the nuts on the ground to cool off. Producers grind the nuts 3 times. They take turns pounding, then muddle the mixture further between rocks. And finally, refine the mixture in a mill. This creates a paste, which they pour into hot water. Here, the oil they need for the butter separates from the paste.
Teddo ni en kayini kerri keni oni boli yikenu kitiene e kayin pe te beru rubu kayin pe beru rubu nye we ko chi we ko nyore ti ti chu kene ti rubu wa ko mo mer ti bera tik ka mo mer bera tik pe shamer dang pe shatte.
The oil is removed and packaged for sale locally, where a kilo costs over $5. It's mainly used for cooking, but locals also use it on their skin. And while it's still pricier than West African shea butter, this heat-processed butter is a more affordable alternative to cold-pressed Nilotica. 1 kilo of cold-pressed East African shea butter can reach $12 in Uganda. And when exported, it's over 4 times that price. That's because cold-pressed shea butter is more refined. It's the cleanest way to extract the oil, which preserves the nut's properties. After harvesting, drying, and grinding the shea nuts, producers place them in cloth bags and load them into a cold-press machine. They've had this machine since 1997. To use it, 2 people need to push each side of the lever in a circle, pressing and releasing the oil from the fat in the shea nuts. When left to rest, the oil hardens into shea butter. From nut to butter, the whole process can take 3 weeks. Today, producers prefer the cold press method because they can make bigger batches of high-quality shea butter. It can also enhance some of the butter's most desired properties. Studies of Nilotica have found that it has significantly higher oleic acid content than West African shea butter. It also has lower stearic acid content, which contributes to the softness of the butter.
This is the West African shea butter with a high melting point, and when it solidifies, it's really hard.
Harder textures are more difficult to integrate into cosmetics. Lucy says that's why Nilotica has the upper hand in cosmetics. Her American buyers prefer it because it absorbs faster into the skin. But Nilotica has other special properties.
The demand at the moment is growing because of these contents, the olein, vitamin E, and then it has antioxidants that make it easy, especially for cosmetics. It has to have a healing factor within it.
This growing demand is being met with limited supply.
The supply is a little lower because the number of producers is still a bit low.
The shea tree fruits only once a year, and producers are still figuring out how to bulk their harvests. And while some efforts are underway to farm more shea trees, the nuts are primarily harvested in the wild, limiting producers further. Then there's deforestation. According to the Ugandan National Forest Authority, the country has lost 63% of its tree cover in the past 25 years. Locals use the wood for charcoal, firewood, and timber. But Nilotica producers hope that as demand continues to grow and locals learn more about Nilotica's value, they'll work to preserve the trees. And in turn, scale up production of East African shea butter. In Carrara, Italy, extracting Calacatta marble doesn't always go as planned.
Però si pensava che non andasse, invece è andato e si è aperto.
It'll take more work to fix, but luckily it's still usable. And in 4 days, it'll be processed into one of the most expensive marble slabs in the world. Just one slab can cost over $10,000. So how is Calacatta mined from mountains? And what makes it so expensive? Marble has been used for centuries by artists and designers. But Calacatta marble isn't just any kind of marble. A square foot of some Calacatta can cost over $400, more than 4 times the price of high-end Carrara marble, which is mined in the same mountains. Its warm, ivory white background and thick gold or gray veins sets Calacatta apart from other marbles. But the key to Calacatta's price is its rarity. It's found only in the Apuan Mountains of Carrara, Italy. Marble has been mined here for over 2,000 years. Extracting Calacatta marble from the mountains requires decades of experience. Enrico has been a miner for 40 years. He learned from his father, who worked at the same quarry.
Ci vuole l'esperienza, ci vuole la visione della cava, i difetti, i fronti di cava, stare a vedere.
It's important that miners have a trained eye and are precise. They need to work around the mountain's defects to avoid the risk of the marble breaking. These flaws affect where the miners can extract, how much they can extract, and eventually, how much they can sell.
Per il taglio del blocco, per tirar fuori il blocco si cerca dei segni nel monte, nella bancata, nel fronte, o un difetto, o un tipo di macchia, o sapere un finimento, sono tutte cose che fanno parte della cava, ecco.
Despite Enrico's care and attention, he doesn't always get the result he wants.
Come abbiamo visto prima, che magari quando si ribalta si stacca un difetto che magari si prevedeva, però ci può essere anche di dietro che non lo vedevi. Quindi quando si ribalta la bancata, la criticità può essere quello lì.
But before they can detach the block, they have to drill and saw. In the first stage of extraction, miners use drills to make strategic holes in the mountain. They then run diamond braid cords through these holes, cutting the marble into a block. The machinery is kept wet to protect the marble as chainsaws help detach the block from the mountain. An average block is 12 cubic meters and can weigh 36 metric tons. It's then carefully loaded into a truck, which brings it to a processing facility. Here, the Calacatta marble blocks are sliced into slabs. At this stage, processors can't afford to make a mistake and risk ruining the rare marble delivered to them. They mount over 100 very thin blades onto a wet saw, and the cutting begins. The saw cuts slabs as thin as 2 centimeters. Then they're prepared for shaping and polishing. The slabs are first sanded and pre-smooth. Then they're prepared for resination, or the application of resin to fill any cracks or holes in the slab. It's also used to attach broken pieces, like the ones that cracked at the quarry.
Questa è in pratica il blocco quando è arrivato giù che ha il materiale, che noi resinandolo lo rendiamo utilizzabile.
And with marble as rare as Calacatta, one mistake can have a big impact on the quality and final price of the slab.
La fase più importante in pratica è tutta una fase importante. Se la prima fase non è stata eseguita correttamente, successivamente le varie fasi non vengono eseguite correttamente. Quindi dobbiamo iniziare da subito, dalla prima fase, a farla correttamente. Quindi la lastra deve essere omogenea, levigata su tutta la sua superficie, nella larghezza della lastra, anche sui vari 4 angoli.
After Sergio checks that the resin was applied evenly, he moves it under UV light to dry. These steps ensure that the slab has no flaws.
Dopo il materiale viene posato per pavimenti, rivestimenti che diventerebbero neri, quindi prenderebbero lo sporco. e perderebbe poi il valore la lastra.
Then the Calacatta slab reaches its final stage. It's honed and polished until it almost sparkles, becoming, as Sergio says, shiny to the eye. It's now ready to be sent to the buyer. Calacatta is extracted and processed on a per-order basis. Producers consult the customer every step of the way. This way, the Calacatta is perfectly customized to the client's needs, because once it's fully processed, there's no going back. Even with these risks and high costs, customers still want Calacatta.
Our customers prefer Calacatta because it's a luxury, it's a high-end product, it's timeless, and it's classical. It fits very well with any kind of furniture.
White marbles like Calacatta are more desirable because they have fewer flaws than darker marbles, so they require less maintenance and repairs. Calacatta is in even higher demand than other white marbles like Carrara. The veins look crisper, less faded. There are generally fewer veins in Calacatta, making it easier to incorporate in exterior and interior design. And it has a softer contrast than other high-end marbles, like Statuario, which has a milky background, darker gray veining, and fewer changes in color.
This is a typical use of Calacatta. It is made in this case to make kitchen countertop, and you can see the typical Calacatta vein.
But certain Calacatta is even more expensive. Calacatta Gold, referring to the vein color, is especially hard to find. While standard Calacatta can cost over $10,000, a Calacatta Gold slab can reach more than $29,000. And while specific pricing is considered an industry secret, Memo says selling isn't an issue.
In the last 40 years, demand for Calacatta has actually increased. And even during times of crisis, people have had a big desire for this type of material.
But this growing demand isn't welcomed by everyone, especially Carrara locals. Sawing extraction techniques have led to slurry and waste being carried to nearby environments through runoff water. This has impacted local groundwater and the people who need it. And environmentalists warn the overexploitation of the mountains will only make things worse. But that hasn't shaken demand for Calacatta, or marble in general. The global marble market is estimated to grow to $68.5 billion by 2027. This is a handmade iron kettle. For centuries, artisans have made kettles by pouring molten iron through a small opening in molds like this. Once the iron hardens, they continue the tedious work of hammering the kettle free. It's only used to boil water, but that doesn't make it cheap. You can buy a mass-produced kettle for $20, but a handmade iron kettle can cost over $300. So who makes these kettles? And why are they so expensive? This is Iwate Prefecture in Japan. Iron kettles have been made here for hundreds of years. Each one starts with a sketch. Nobumiya runs Kamasada, a workshop founded by his grandfather.
大体20歳ぐらいから始めてますんで、50年、まだ50年です。
Designing a new kettle takes him 2 to 3 years.
売れるものを作るっていうのは意外と早くできる仕事なんだろうと思いますけども、確かにビジネスですから売れるものを作るっていうのは絶対必要なことなんだけれども、じゃあ自分の気にそぐわないでも見にあんまり綺麗でなくても売れるものを作るかっていうと、それはうちはしないし。
At this workshop, every single kettle is made by hand. But before you start melting iron, you need a mold. The mold is made from 3 parts that form a gap where the iron is poured in.
そうすると、言った通りに外側と内側が間がこの 2.5 ミリから2ミリの隙間になるんですけども、その隙間を、この尻型の穴から流し込んだ液体の鉄が通って、鉄瓶になる いう感じですね。
The core is destroyed with each use, but the outer molds are reused 2 to 3 times, depending on the design of the kettle.
それ以上になると明らかに質が目立って悪くなりますので、だから一型から一つしか取れないっていった場合ですと、単純に普通の品物の3倍はするわけですね。
According to Nobu, around 70% of the work is making the mold. This process also creates the most recognizable aspect of the design, this bumpy pattern called arare. This mold has around 2,000 dots, all placed by hand.
僕の場合はだいたい2時間半から3時間で全部押し切ってしまう感じですね。洗いの数が多くなればなるほど基本的には鉄瓶の値段にはかかってきますね。はい、高くなってきますね。
Artisans coat the core with charcoal dust to make it easier to separate from the iron. Then Shitaro delicately places it inside the outer mold. But he won't know if something went wrong until the iron has cooled. There's a lot of anticipation waiting for the iron to melt. Shitaro has to mentally prepare for the pour, a dangerous and physically demanding task. A mistake here could ruin the kettle, so experience and confidence are essential. Once the iron cools, Shitaro finally sees the result of his hard work.
ここが一番ホッとするか、ああ失敗したってなるかっていうのが分かる瞬間でもありますね。できるだけ、無理のない取り出し方をするという感じですね。これが、多少欠けている部分がありますけど、ほぼ元になったということで、これもう一回使いますね。まあまあですね。この中子の取り出しやすさっていうと80点ぐらいですかね。はい、安心ですね、ここでやっと。
Traditional iron kettles like this one don't have any enamel coating inside. Instead, artisans heat the kettle to 900 degrees Celsius on a bed of charcoal. This creates an oxidized layer, which helps prevent rust. Without an enamel coating, the iron subtly changes the taste of boiled water. But this kettle isn't done yet. The final stage is one of the most skill-intensive steps. Nobu heats up the kettle and brushes on lacquer, coating and coloring the outside.
仕上げ着色っていうのは意外とかなりベテランにならないと綺麗な仕上げができないっていうのは温度管理なんですね、これ難しいのは。そういう意味では、一番最終工程にふさわしく、あとは自分が思い描いてたものがこの着色一つで全然違うものになったりすることもあるんで、分業の方が効率的であることは分かってるんですけども、どうしても責任の所在が曖昧になったり、作る側が面白くなく作るんですね。で、物っていうのは面白く作らないといいものはできないっていうのは僕の考え方なんで。
Most kettles from Kamasada cost $300 to $400, but prices can be as high as $2,000. Despite the high price, customers appreciate the slow-paced nature of these kettles. The design is considered wabi-sabi, which is difficult to translate literally, but refers to the concept of appreciating imperfection and practicing mindfulness.
で僕はデザインするときに決して便利なものっていうのがいいものではないと。っていうのは使って幸せになるものがいいものだと。お金を出してその僕の作った品物を評価して買ってくれるっていうのはこれはとても大事なことだと思います。それから一生使って次の代にも受け渡して自分らの美意識っていうのかな心とか文化を伝えたいと。
Iron kettles were common in Japan in the 17th and 18th centuries when they were used in tea ceremonies. But they struggled to compete with convenient, mass-produced options after World War II. In recent years, interest in their aesthetic qualities has reignited demand. But that demand has brought on many knockoffs that can be bought for a fraction of the price. These kettles imitate the arare pattern but usually aren't made in Japan. They also have an enameled interior instead of the bare iron used in the traditional version. But the original, uncoated interior is actually one of the main selling points. Customers say they like the taste of water boiled in these kettles, and some also value the small amount of iron content it adds to their water.
鉄瓶で沸かしたお湯がまろやかになること、鉄イオンが溶け込むことで塩素を分解するのでカルキ臭さが抜けて味が美味しくなる、まろやかになる。1世代前2世代前おじいちゃんおばあちゃんの家にあったっていう方の方が多いのが現状です。で今こうやってカフェで見に来ていただいた方は見たことはあるけど使ったことがなかったっていう人の方が多いです。
Despite an increase in popularity, Nobuo says that demand for this type of kettle isn't enough to sustain the business on its own.
私は昔からここは鉄瓶とか茶の湯釜を使って家業なんですけども、やっぱりライフスタイルに合った形でデザインして、提案しているっていうのがもちろん古い伝統的なテクニックを使った鉄瓶であるとか、それから茶の湯釜であるとか、そういうものは作り続けて、その技術を伝承しようと思ってそういう仕事もやっております。
Shotaro, Nobuo's son, has trained in making iron kettles and plans on taking over the business to continue this centuries-old craft.
この工場の土間に敷いてある砂っていうのは鋳型を作る材料そのものの砂がもう敷かれてます。で鋳型ができて金属を流し込んだ後型を壊すときにこの土間にまた戻してしまいます。ここの土間は、うちの祖父が創業した100何年前からの砂も混じってるかもしれません。
Sculpting, glazing, and firing are just a few of the labor-intensive steps required to make ceramics. Handmade ceramic dinnerware isn't cheap, but porcelain dinnerware can be even more expensive. The price of porcelain varies, but some dishware, like this plate, can cost over $400. So how are ceramics made? And why is porcelain so expensive? There's a good chance that you sit on porcelain every day. It's the most common material used to make toilets. The reason why is also why it's a popular choice for dishware. Compared to other ceramics, porcelain is more durable and non-porous, so it lasts a long time, and it's easy to clean. It has a distinct white color, and unlike opaque stoneware, some porcelain is translucent. The secret to these differences is in the clay. Clay used for porcelain contains a high percentage of kaolin. This is what makes porcelain white. Kaolin is found all over the world, but large, high-quality deposits are rare.
慶徳鎮とか有田とかその天草の石っていうのはその石自体で磁気化するんで白いんですよね、石が。で他の配合糖土っていうのは焼くとちょっとネズミ色みたいになるんで釉薬で白くしてるんですね。
Porcelain is often referred to as China, which is where it was first created. But today, it's made all over the world. This is the Arita Porcelain Lab in Japan. Artisans young and old have made porcelain here for over 200 years. There are countless recipes for porcelain clay, but in addition to kaolin, they usually contain materials like quartz, feldspar, and ball clay. Each one changes the properties of the clay. Ball clay makes it more malleable, and feldspar helps it become glass-like when fired. The whitest, translucent clays need to be free from impurities, and generally cost more than other ceramic clays. But even for experienced potters, porcelain can be tricky to work with. In order to produce a large number of pieces, this workshop has an artisan for each specific step in the process. Even though 10 people work on each piece, producing new dishware can take over a month.
あまりこの成形をするときに力を入れすぎるとちょっと出来上がった時に薄くなってしまったりとか、逆にあんまりちょっと軽く当てすぎてもちょっとガタガタガタってなって汚くなったりとかしますね。形が出来上がっていくのは面白いですね。
Compared to other ceramics, many porcelain clays are challenging to mold by hand. It's also more prone to cracks when drying. To help with this, and to produce more uniform pieces, this workshop uses molds for complex shapes. Katsumi Yamashita has been working with porcelain for 60 years.
焼き物作りっていうのは勘が働かんと。例えば今接着してるけど、この硬さでいいのか悪いのか、乾燥度合いがどういう状態か。難しいから面白いんですよね。
One of those difficult steps is glazing. Glazing seals the clay, but it also adds color and patterns. And it's one of the reasons that ceramics can be so expensive. At this workshop, each design is delicately painted by hand.
今これやってるのはちょっと作家さんのものなんですけど、その作家さんと相談しながら作り、買いのから安いのなんかたくさん特に上絵とかはピンからキリまであるので、もう私が買おうと思って 100g でくださいって言ったら何万もしますよって言われて買えなかったことがあるので、それはもう書いた時間イコール値段ですよね。なのでもう時間がかかればかかるほど値段もそれに合わせて高くなるので。
Another challenge in making porcelain is temperature. In order to achieve that glass-like surface, porcelain is fired at a higher temperature than most other ceramics, usually around 1300 degrees Celsius. At this workshop, pieces are fired 3 times, a lengthy but crucial process. The first firing is done without glaze, at 950 degrees for 2 days. Slow firing ensures that pieces don't break in the kiln. Once they've been fired, artisans apply what's called underglaze. The main firing at 1300 degrees takes 3 days. Loading this kiln is a daunting task, but it has to be done carefully, otherwise pieces could be destroyed inside. Thankfully, this firing was a success. Now, the final design starts to take shape.
焼き上がった商品に今度は上絵付けっていうのをしていきます。その後800度で焼き付けて、完成すると。大きなお皿を一つ作るには大体成形から上絵までで、1月半から2ヶ月ぐらいかかりますね。
The price of porcelain varies based on the size and complexity of the design. A simple rice bowl costs around $7, but the most expensive platter from this workshop costs a few $1,000s. This blue and white design is a traditional look for porcelain, but in order to maintain interest in this ancient craft, the Arita Porcelain Lab has tried to create more contemporary designs that fit into a modern home.
もともとの有田焼っていうのはその日本家屋の中で見ると非常に色彩が合ってるっていうようなものなんですね。だから私としては今住環境が非常にモダン化されてるんでデザイン自体はすごくいいデザインなんですけど色が合ってないんじゃないかと思いまして、だからやっぱりこれからまた100年200年続けていくには常にやっぱ新しい技法を生み出したりとか新しいことにやっぱチャレンジしていかないと続いていかないと思うんで。
In the forests of South India, harvesters climb trees as tall as 50 feet to handpick these clove buds. When exported, less than half a pound of these dried cloves costs $30. That's 10 times as much as some cumin. But as they focus on keeping their balance, harvesters must also be careful not to break the buds. If they do, the value of the clove drops significantly, and that's just where the risk begins. To harvest cloves correctly, workers put their lives on the line. So what makes cloves worth the risks? And why are they so expensive? Cloves are the flower buds of clove trees that haven't blossomed yet. When dried, they're commonly used as a spice. A clove's flavor is complex, with notes of sweetness, bitterness, and heat. The oil found in cloves has medicinal properties that make the spice valuable outside of just cooking. Cloves with the round head or crown still intact have the most oil. But to get cloves with the highest possible oil content, highly skilled workers are needed at every stage.
Clove harvesting is a very big job. It's a very risky job. So we have to get special people to do that.
To get to the top of the trees, harvesters like Shibu rely on only a ladder and some rope.
അത് ഈ 3 കയറ് 3 സ്ഥലത്തോട്ട് വലിച്ച് കെട്ടിയാക്കില്ല ഈ ഏണി സൈഡ് ഏണി നിൽക്കത്തുള്ളൂ.
He reinforces the bottom of the ladder with mud so it doesn't move as he navigates the tall tree. Shibu ties a sack to his waist and then he starts his climb, working his way from the top of the tree to the bottom. Harvesters can't pick too soon or too late, or the cloves will drop in grade and value. In addition to picking at the exact right time and being careful not to harm the clove bud, they need to be sure not to break the tree branches they climb. Otherwise, the tree will have a lower yield next harvesting season. Navigating all these elements can be extremely dangerous. In Black Rock Estates, harvesting cloves has led to death.
A couple of years back, we lost a worker who was while he was plucking, the lightning struck him. We lost almost about 6 of them they had paralyzed. We had to take them, rush them down to the hospital, and they were admitted for a month.
Yet handpicking is the only way farms like Black Rock Estate have managed to keep delivering quality cloves. Because timing is crucial, Charles needs a big team to pick the cloves as soon as they're ready, which is usually mid to late February. Charles can sell the cloves for their highest price in the first 25 days of the harvesting season. The more he can harvest during this time, the better it is for business.
When the clove season is fully on, when we have a very good crop, we get about 300 workers.
During peak harvesting season, these workers make around $30 a day on average. Once the clove clusters are picked, harvesters carefully remove the individual buds from the stalks and leaves. They sift and sort each bud according to its size, age, and whether it has a top. It's best if the circular crown of the clove, where it would otherwise flower, is still intact. This improves the spice's taste and aroma. Even though there are machines to help with this process, Charles prefers to pay for it to be done by hand, to lower the risk of clove damage.
They have clove breaking and sorting with machinery. But still the half the cloves is damaged in that. We get broken cloves in that. So it's not very good doing it to the machine.
The highest quality cloves were picked at the right time, just before they turned pink or flowered. They're large and plump and still have the crown. Second quality cloves also still have their tops, but they're smaller. They were either picked too early or too late. And the third quality has no crown, with the top having either flowered or broken off. After the sorting, workers leave the cloves out to dry in the sun. High-quality cloves take 3 days to dry under good sunlight. But a quality clove won't always get sold as the highest grade, because official grading doesn't happen until after it's dry. If there's too little or too much sun, the clove's quality drops. Instead of golden brown, it becomes black, and it loses one of its most valuable properties, its oil content. First quality cloves are the most fragrant and have the highest oil content. The headless third quality cloves have the least. And the difference shows in the price. Charles sells his first quality cloves for about $10 a kilogram, and its lowest grade for under $7. Clove oil is mostly made up of the compound eugenol, which is not only responsible for the clove's familiar aroma, but also for its medicinal benefits. Researchers have noted eugenol has antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, pain-relieving, and antioxidant properties. So the demand for cloves goes beyond their culinary uses. Cloves are so sought after in India that Charles is able to sell more than just the buds.
We sell everything, nothing goes to waste. Even the pollen, the dust, everything we sell.
That's also because the cloves he grows, Kanyakumari cloves, are known for their high oil content and strong aroma. In fact, these cloves were awarded a GI indication in 2021. Charles says Kanyakumari cloves are the most expensive variety in India.
When you go to the market to buy cloves, the clove price will be about 3 times the price what we give. It will be about 2,000 rupees, where we get only 750.
The retail price is so much higher because of the supply chain. To maximize on profits for the farm, Charles won't sell his cloves directly to consumers, who only buy smaller amounts as needed. Instead, he sells to clove dealers who buy large quantities. Dealers like Franklin Roosevelt then have to keep the cloves fresh until they sell them to retailers. If he doesn't store the cloves properly, their shelf life drops.
ग्लो के लिए एक टेम्परेचर है, उस टेम्परेचर में वो लोग उसको स्टॉक रखते हैं और मोस्टली कोल्ड स्टोरेज में ही जाके उतरता है. मतलब नॉर्मल टेम्परेचर में रहेगा तो माल भी ख़राब हो जाता है और उसका टेस्ट फ्लेवर नहीं रहता है.
To cover the cost of quality control, Franklin sells cloves to stores for almost $12 a kilo. The shops that buy from Franklin have to pay transportation and packaging costs, bringing the retail price of cloves in India even higher. But one of the biggest challenges in every step of the supply chain has been the changing climate.
ज़्यादा बारिश होने की वजह से पेड़ों में फंगस गिर जाता है तो सारा माल झड़ जाता है. तो जो लैंडलॉर्ड होता है, इसका जो ओनर्स होते हैं, उनको भी हेवी लॉस हो जाता है. और जो लोग इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, जैसे मेरे जैसे जो ट्रेडर्स हैं, वो लोग हम लोग ये बहुत बाहर गांव से लेबर्स बहुत लाते हैं, तो लेबर्स को नौकरी नहीं होता है. हम लोग ट्रेडिंग भी उतना ठीक से कर नहीं पाते.
Between 2018 and 2019, India lost 13 metric tons of cloves due to heavy rainfall. And while the global clove market is expected to grow by 3.5% by 2027, the changing climate may still continue to disproportionately burden clove farmers.
नहीं, अभी फार्मर्स लोगों को इतना उसमें प्रॉफिट नहीं दिख रहा है, क्योंकि वो मैं बोला ना, ऐसे बारिश हो जाता है तो ये सब होता है और उनको उतना जितना उन्होंने इन्वेस्टमेंट किया है उतना उनको रिटर्न नहीं है. वो है, अगर वो लोग भी अगर ट्रेडिंग लाइन में आते हैं तो ठीक है, लेकिन बहुत कम लोग ही आते हैं, क्योंकि वो लोग इतना रिस्क लेके सब लोग नहीं जाते हैं. इसमें रिस्क लेंगे तो है पैसा मिलता है.
On day 1, harvesters cut out these river reeds. And in 8 days, after drying, burning, and filtering, the reeds will produce one of the most expensive salts in the world. Just 1 tablespoon of river reed salt costs about $1 in Kenya. Compare that to the 4 cents it costs locals for the same amount of sea salt. So how do producers make salt from river reeds? And why is it so expensive? River reed salt, or chumvi ya kienyeji, is made from the reeds of the machua plant that grow along the Nzoia River. Once the salt is extracted, it's typically sold in small quantities to chefs and luxury hotel owners in Kenya and abroad. Buyers describe its saltiness as powerful and umami-like.
I buy the river reed salt because of, I will say, the magic in it. The texture is smooth. It is not rough or coarse. For those who have tasted umami from Japan, it tastes almost the same, but this one has more of a sharp taste. So when you're cooking with it, you won't use a lot of it.
Today, only the Bukuzu community in the village of Webuye continues the traditional process of making this rare salt by hand. This is the Nzoia River, and this is Andrew Wanyonyi Sikanga. Andrew and his sons harvest the reeds that grow along the riverbanks. Before they go out to harvest, Andrew starts the morning with a prayer.
Jina la Baba, la Mwana, la Roho Mtakatifu. Amen.
They pray for protection from the dangers they might encounter at the river, like snakes and crocodiles. To avoid coming into contact with them, Andrew and his sons need to harvest early.
Kwa sababu huwa nyoka zinatembea mchana kama jua inakuja, lakini asubuhi baridi iko haitembei. Sasa tunaenda huko kwa sababu ya hiyo vitu bado ingali kwa mashimo.
Today, they're looking for ripe river reeds.
Vile iko hivi ni mrefu kuliko kama sasa hii ni kitoko. Tunalingana. Sasa hii iko na chumvi. Lakini bado changa, hakuna chumvi. Ndio sasa tunaangalia kwa urefu wa chumvi yenyewe. Ndio nilikuwa nasema 2 meters kwenda juu. Lakini kama iko hivi tunaiacha.
If the reed isn't at least 2 meters tall and the flowers at the top aren't wilted and nearly dried, the concentration of salt will be too low. Andrew hacks away at the ripe reeds, being careful not to uproot the plant or cut too close to the roots. That way, the reeds can regrow more quickly, and the roots can continue to spread onto other rocks. Only reeds with a high salt content make the effort worth it, because from them, Andrew can make enough salt to sell.
Alafu iko ni riski. Alafu saa zingine nini kikuja namna hivi, hii maji kikuja inakuja na uchafu, lakini kikuja na miiba kama vile imekuwa hapa namna hivi. Sasa ikifika hapa hivi, usipochunga vizuri, ukianza kukata kumbe umeshika miiba alafu na kutunga. Au saa zingine unajikata hivi vile huyu amejikata hapa saa hii. Sasa hiyo ni changamoto ya hapa.
Though there was a mild injury, today's harvest was a good one. After a long day of navigating the waters of the Nzoia River, Andrew and his sons leave the riverbank with a lot of reeds.
Wa Februari. Sasa hii ndio tumepata na ingine pato ingali iko nyumbani. Tumefurahia leo. Hapa yote vile iko hivi nikichoma itaweza kuwa kama grams 200 hivi. Hapa itaweza kuwa vijiko grams 200, vijiko 20.
Those 20 tablespoons will sell for about $20. Now they can begin the long manual process of extracting salt. First, Andrew must dry the reeds. Drying reeds can take 4 days when the skies are sunny, but in cloudier weather, it'll take longer. To begin processing, he has to burn the reeds for 1 to 3 days. Once all the reeds turn to ash, Andrew places them in a large pot with drainage holes. Then he slowly adds water. The water filters through the ashes and holes, each drop collecting at the bottom. He pours those droplets through another filter and into an aluminum pan. Next, he places the pan over an open fire, where the solution is left to boil until the liquid evaporates. Finally, after a full day of work, Andrew is left with this wet, salty paste. The next day, he packs the paste into banana leaves and places them under hot ashes to dry. After 3 hours, the salt hardens. From reed to salt, the process takes at least 8 days. Andrew will sell the salt in the banana leaves. This is the same long process his family has practiced for generations.
Sasa hii miaka 20 na kwa kupata vile walikuwa wanatengeneza, baba wangu ndiye alikuwa anatengeneza, alafu nami nikajifunza kutoka kwa baba yangu mzazi.
It's believed the tradition began in the 17th century when the Bakuzu people migrated eastward from Congo. At the time, areas in western Kenya were cut off from salt routes. So they set out to find a way to extract salt from these aquatic plants. Centuries later, the salt that was made out of necessity became a pricey commodity. At the market, this pack containing just 3 tablespoons of river reed salt costs about $3, and this larger pack, $7. It's likely to sell because local demand is high. Buyers know the intense work put into making this salt, so for them, the price is worth it. Although there aren't studies to confirm it, market sellers say that part of what keeps the salt in high demand locally is the belief it has special medicinal properties. But the most notable feature is its taste. In fact, Andrew's River Reed salt won the title for most unique indigenous salt at an international gastronomy exhibition in Italy in 2014. Slow Food, one of the organizers of the exhibition, established a presidium in 2009 for Kenya's River Reed salt to drive more demand for the product. But fulfilling that demand would require more supply, which is difficult when production is so limited. One of the biggest threats to river reed salt production is climate change. According to Slow Food, the growing population in Kenya has led to deforestation. Indigenous trees along the Nzoia River have long held soil particles together and provided shade, keeping temperatures stable. But the loss of these trees, along with higher temperatures, unstable river levels, and landslides, has contributed to the loss of river reeds. Andrew tried growing the reeds with other water sources, but couldn't get the same outcome.
Hapo hata mbeleni nilikuwa nimekumbuka hiyo, alafu nikapandako huku nyumbani. Na vile nilipanda nyumbani ikakua, ikafika mahali namna hivi. Na nikileta maji nyingine ya kunyunyiza inaenda chini. Lakini nikichukua maji ya Nzoia inafurahi, inaenda juu. Lakini tu mradi maji ya Nzoia peke yake. Nimefanya hiyo utafiti, maji nyingine inakataa.
In addition to conservation efforts like replanting indigenous trees, Slow Food is working on creating more marshy areas for the reeds to grow.
Since the river reed salt really does well with the waters from the river, we were thinking that if we try a little bit to divert some of these water from the river and have a marshy area plus some of the rocks, we can actually try to see whether we can increase the number of reeds, because I know that as the people continue knowing about this particular salt, there will be high demand.
This small blue gemstone is one of the rarest in the world. And because of the unique way it forms in the earth, bonitolite sparkles even brighter than diamonds, making it incredibly expensive. A single carat can cost over $12,000. But you can only really find this gem in one place. So why is bonitolite so hard to find? And what makes it so expensive?
How is bonitolite different from other gemstones? It has a brighter vitreous luster.
That means it looks like glass, but brighter, shinier. It also has a high dispersion, or fire, meaning it can sparkle more than other gemstones.
So, here we are on the top of the mine.
This is a private mine. It's part of Benitoite Mining Company, owned by John and Dave Schreiner. The company is stationed here because facet-grade benitoite can be found in only one location, San Benito County, California. That's why it's the state's gem.
There have been microscopic deposits found in Japan, but so far this is the only place where you can find it where it's actually big enough to hold in your hand and to put in jewelry.
Not knowing how rare it was, miners used to extract benitoite just like any other gem, with explosions and blunt force. And now, the supply is finite. Gemstones like benitoite are generally scattered, but sometimes there's a vein underground where concentrated amounts of the gem collect. Benitoite formed when an oceanic plate and a crustal plate came together. One plate slid under the other and water got trapped in the fault line. Magma then intruded into the fault line and mixed with the trapped water. As cracks and veins formed in the surrounding rock, the superheated mixture flowed into them. Here, the rare element barium bound with titanium, silica, and other elements. Together, they formed benitoite. But finding the gem is a bit of a guessing game, and if John and Dave guess incorrectly, the cost is high. To help them find where benitoite might be, they look for this. The white part of the rock is nitrolite, and the dark part, blue schist. These are two minerals that surround and protect benitoite. If they see the white, it may mean they found a benitoite vein. And when the vein breaks out onto the surface, it's referred to as an outcrop.
A big vein or a big outcrop of benitoite was right here, and it had fallen against the mountain. That was dug out, dynamited, all the material off the top of it's gone. That doesn't mean there's not stones here. They're all over the place.
Yet a benitoite vein hasn't been found here since the late 1990s. So today, John and Dave are mining in a location they think has potential. They have to narrow down where they think the vein is, because excavating and drilling is expensive, and they can't afford to be wrong. Core drilling alone will cost them $200,000.
Funding is always an issue. Mining is not a cheap venture. Normally that's what's holding us back, just having the funds to actually move forward.
So as they work up to that funding, they're also working to confirm exactly where the vein is. After they load all the material they excavated, they can begin processing it to see if there's a concentration of benitoite. That starts with sorting.
This is the first stage of the wash plant. Right over here is where the material gets dumped in originally. So everything above 1.5 inches gets stopped right there.
After this, John can locate larger specimens that need to be acid etched, where acid is used to carefully break off the benitoite from its surroundings. They also screen for everything under 1/8 inch, and the sorted material goes up a long conveyor belt to be washed in the trammel. The trammel shakes and cleans the rocks before they hit the blacklight room. Benitoite is fluorescent, so the Shriners use UV light to identify the gem without damaging it. After, he screens and washes all the fluorescent pieces and collects the best ones.
There's one of them. That is a benitoite.
Even though John found some good pieces of benitoite, today's excavation was just okay.
This is good. We've done better.
Still, he and Dave remain hopeful. They're confident that they're getting really close to locating that vein.
Finding another benitoite vein would be outstanding. It would change a lot of things. That is the direction we're going in and that we want to go in. It's financially hindering, but we are getting there.
But even if John and Dave find a vein, it doesn't mean all the benitoite they excavate can be sold for top dollar. Benitoite is a naturally small gem, like diamonds, so most of the rocks they find can't be faceted into a clean, clear gem.
On average, you lose about 80% of the stone during the cutting process. It also depends on how clean you want the stone to be.
But the remarkable and highly valuable properties of bonitowhite make all this work worth it.
What's also very unique about bonitowhite is that it is doubly refractive. So when the light enters the stone, it splits into two rays.
This creates a doubling effect, giving bonitowhite a complex internal appearance. Yet on the surface, it looks like light bounces off the gem on all sides. The depth these qualities create is enriched by the stone's color, which shows in the price.
In a colored gemstone is color. Color, color, color is the first and last and most important factor affecting value in a colored gemstone. And depth also holds the color. Like a deeper stone can have a deeper color, and that makes it more valuable. The darker the color, the more valuable the stone typically is.